Well, front page of Farmers Weekly this week, thanks to Nigel Sterling, is a story about trade negotiations and how the environmental and animal welfare record of New Zealand farmers is coming under closer scrutiny in our trade talks as countries search for new ways to maintain protections for their own food producers. New Zealand's top trade negotiator, Vangali Vitalis, has warned sheep and beef farmers in a recent online seminar that the pandemic had accelerated a resurgence in protectionism in agricultural trade and that there was more still to come. Billions of dollars in subsidies are being shoveled into the pockets of farmers in the world's major economies to protect them from the fallout of trade wars and, of course, that hit to demand from coronavirus. Joining us now is Senior Trade Policy Manager, my apologies, Stephanie Honey from Beef and Lamb. Stephanie, welcome to Sarah's Country.
Kia ora, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
It was a fantastic webinar that you held recently, and of course, front page, there is that warning from our trade negotiators that this is about market access now. This isn't about a premium. Can you set the scene on some of those key messages that Vangali touched on?
Certainly, Sarah. Yes, it's a very turbulent time in trade, unfortunately, and it regrettably does actually predate COVID-19 as well. So for the last few years, we've seen rising protectionism around the world, including in some of our key markets. And, one of the big challenges for New Zealand exporters and for, of course, the trade officials is to do what we can to counter that rising protectionism. That said, we're very fortunate to have somebody like Vangali Vitalis in the seat there. He does a great job for New Zealand, and so do the Minister of Trade and Economic Development, David Parker, but it's a big challenge for us as a sector to counter those protectionist impulses. And of course, since COVID-19, there's been even more pressure on that market access issue, as you mentioned.
I want to jump straight to the deals going on between the EU and South America and how that is having untoward effect on New Zealand.
Well, if you've followed the media in the last little while, you would probably have seen protests and so on around Europe about this new trade deal that the European Union and Mercosur, so those countries in Latin America, have struck. And a lot of the concern from European consumers in particular has been around the impact of that trade deal. Essentially, the new market access that the Europeans have granted to those Latin American countries might provoke more production of beef and other products in those countries. And the concern there is that, or the fear is that it might prompt more deforestation in the Amazon, for example. So, removing the trees in order to produce more beef to supply into Europe.
Now, of course, anything with consumers and movements are all about that simple, actionable messaging. And is New Zealand able to cut through and say, we don't cut down our native forest to produce beef?
Yes, I mean, we're both smiling. It seems like such a ridiculous idea that we would do that. New Zealand, I'm very proud to say, has a great record here and is very proactive, both at the level of the negotiators, but also, of course, our wonderful farming community. So, I think our approach has been driven not just because it's the right thing to do to safeguard the environment, but also because obviously we're very responsive to what our consumers and our customers want. And we're hearing all around the world, not just in Europe, that those are concerns that customers really put a high weight on. So, of course, over the years, the sector itself has done, incredibly well to address those sustainability concerns. I think farmers have reduced greenhouse gas emissions by about 30%, all the while maintaining production levels at about the same sort of level. And, we can credit that a very deliberate attempt to improve productivity, to improve the systems and the way that we do things. We produce more from less and in a more environmentally sustainable way. So that's one of the key messages that we're trying to deliver to the Europeans, that we hear what consumers want, we know what's the right thing to do, and we're actively seeking to do that.
Stephanie, before you go, you spoke there about Minister David Parker and his involvements with trade negotiations. How closely aligned, apart from the fact that he has two distinct policies, the environment and trade, is what he's hearing overseas affecting domestic policy here at home? And do you believe as a sector we understand yet the depth of demand from our consumers internationally?
Well, Sarah, that's a great question. And I think, I look at it through a trade lens. It's a win-win. The kind of products that we produce responding to consumers are also systems and approaches that are environmentally friendly and sustainable. We produce to the market, and we produce in a way that's unsubsidised, that seeks to enhance, sustainable production, and that delivers the value back to our processing companies, to our exporters, but of course also to farmers and farming communities. So it's a win-win, really. And, I think beef and lamb, and we work very closely with the Meat Industry Association, are very actively engaged with our trading partners to tell that story, that very positive story about our values and our production systems. Of course, the sector is very closely involved with He Waka Eke Noa, with the government and with Māori, to, basically prioritise those environmental concerns in our production systems. And, that's a win for our exports as well.
Thank you so much, Senior Trade Policy Manager Stephanie Honey there, following the Beef and Lamb New Zealand webinar recently with the Director of Foreign Trade, Vingali Vitalis, a very intelligent man representing New Zealand on a global stage.
This is Sarah's Country.